Welcome back to the Flex Diet Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike T. Nelson. On this podcast, we talk about all things to increase muscle, improve performance, and do it in a flexible framework without destroying your health. Today on the podcast, I've got my good friend, Katie Emerson. And she is done many things. Right now, she is the Senior Manager of Scientific Affairs at Kyowa Hakko USA. The main ingredient you might have heard from them is Cognizin, also known as CDP Choline. She is a registered and licensed dietitian, research scientist, and she is currently also pursuing her PhD in exercise science. And in this podcast, we had a really great discussion about kind of the inside look at the supplement industry. What are some of the different ingredients and what are some of the benefits? We've got many other episodes in the past about creatine. So on this one, I wanted to do something that you might be familiar with or you might not. So I originally got to see Katie again at the ISSN conference, which is great. If you want to check that out, it'll be again in June in Florida. I don't have the exact dates here in front of me, but I'll be presenting there this year. And looks like from what I've heard, as always, they've got a great lineup there. So here we're probably talking about CDP Choline, which has some very good benefits to performance, memory, cognition. As I mentioned, you may have heard it called acetylcholine. And it's kind of one of those that I think is becoming a lot more popular now. And it's got a ton of great data. So I wanted Katie to come on here and to talk all about that. And then we even get into things like mental resilience and performance, some even genetic mapping. What are some of the dosing of acetylcholine? And we also explored a few other things such as glutathione. So I think you will enjoy this episode if you're looking for simple supplements and ways to enhance your performance and cognition. And also as our sponsors, the main one is myself. So if you want more information from me, you can go to miketnelson.com is the best place for that. And hop on to the newsletter. We're in the process of redoing the website, but it should be pretty easy to figure out where to hop on the newsletter, completely free. And we'll also send you a great gift. And then in the Flex 4, I asked her, rapid fire, what are the top 4 things people should know about acetylcholine as a supplement? So if you want to hear that exclusive content, that only goes to the people on the Insider newsletter list. So if you're already on the Insider newsletter, you will get that sent out to you. If not, like I said, you can still hop on for free and you will get that Flex 4 rapid fire question sent to you automatically. And you'll also get all of the other Flex 4 questions that are very short and something you can take action on right away. And they have never been released to the podcast or anywhere else publicly. So go to miketnelson.com, hop on to the newsletter, and you'll be able to get all of that cool stuff for free. So without further ado, here is my good friend, Katie Emerson. Welcome to the podcast. How are you? Good to see you again.
I'm good. So good to see you. Nice catching up.
Yeah, I got to see you again at ISSN. You were nice enough to cart me around to dinner one night. That was fun.
Yeah, I love having dinner conversations after an event like ISSN because the topics keep flowing. You get different opinions from different people. So that's probably my favorite event of the year.
Yeah, my favorite too. And it's not only are the presentations great, and everybody there is just super cool. It's this weird hybrid mix of like hardcore academics to practitioners to new people in the field. And it's like seeing a lot of old friends I don't see maybe only like once a year, really. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I see a few more times than that. And like you said, the dinner conversations and the hallway conversations. And I always feel like I have my little list in my head of people I want to see and see what's going on. And if I'm good, I only get to 70% at best.
Isn't that funny? And it's like you try to leave the conference and go to the bathroom and you get stopped like six
Yes.
times on the way because it's I want to, and then you'll be in the middle of a conversation. It's like, hey, I want to talk to you. But you're right, it's such a fun mix. And I say this to everybody. If anyone's never gone to ISSN, so International Society of Sports Nutrition, it's always in Florida. It is one event where you have hardcore experts, like top of the line researchers from all over that come in and like they can lend so much expertise and knowledge, but also they're open to, sorry, that's my dog.
Oh, you're good.
Let me go grab him. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah, all good.
And they go just absolutely nuts.
Oh,
Um,
all good.
So yeah, so it's a place where the experts they come and they teach you, but they also are willing to learn, which I feel
Hmm.
like is different than a lot of other events. Like if a student is there, they listen and they're open. So it's a give and take learning experience from experts to novices, and there's really no like ego, which it's hard to say when you're with someone who's been in a research position for 30, 40 years and have published hundreds of thousands of papers. They always put their ego aside and it just becomes a fun conversation around science. So, yeah, ISSN, my favorite event of the year.
Yeah, and it's also fun just to meet people you've read a lot of their research and people you know on the periphery, and like you said, just the conversations outside, because sometimes if you're like a hardcore nerd like we are, you feel like no one really reads any research, no one's really doing anything. And then I remember it was a couple of years ago, we were at a speaker dinner with DC and Dr. Dan, who used to work in,
Hmm.
and we just started drinking and arguing about, in a nice, polite way, about the effect of exercise and nutrition and which one was better. And we got kicked out of the free bar there, and so we're walking down the street, and they're like pulling up papers on their phones and shit. And we ended up talking in the lobby for like another hour after that.
That is the best. So even my husband's a physician and we don't fight, but we have scientific debates. And so
Yeah,
our
yeah.
kids are like, are you guys getting divorced? And I'm like, no, we're just arguing over like an exercise protocol and what nutritional approach to take. And it's so it is like that at ISSN. And I love getting into those debates. And it is cool when I meet someone there and then I go home and I'm reading papers and I see the author and I'm like, hey, I just spoke to them. It just comes full circle. So it's such a fun event to do with people. And then meeting you, I think I was just like picking your brain about things
Oh
with
yeah.
known injuries. And I'm just like, hey, what do you think about this? So yeah, it's just such a great pool of knowledge from everybody.
Yeah, we had dinner, and I got to sit next to Arnie, who's been doing this research for decades, and it's just like, you can ask him anything, and he's just like, "Oh, back in the day, we did this thing and that thing," and it's always, you
Arnie's
just learn a ton of
great.
stuff.
Oh, yeah, I love Arnie. He's been a mentor of mine for many years, and it's so great catching up with people.
Yeah. So our plug that we didn't even get paid for, you should go to ISSN this coming year. It'll be in June in Florida. I don't have the dates in front of me.
It's always like the second week of June, second or third
Sounds
week.
about right.
Yeah, and it was in Delray last year. I don't know where it is this year or
Probably
the
closer to
year
Joey's
coming up.
house again.
Joey and I live 1 mile apart.
Oh, really?
So, yes, I literally 1 mile apart. And I always joke to him, I'm like, why don't we have it in Stewart in our town? And the conference center isn't big enough.
That was the reason.
Yeah, he tried.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure he's tried.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I know you'll be there again. I'll be doing a short talk there next year too, so
Oh,
everybody come on
good.
out.
What's your talk going to be on?
I believe I think it's on wearables actually. So,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of
yeah.
new research that my company's looking into of possibly using wearables. So I'm always skeptical, like how validated is it? What population has it been tested in? What measures are sensitive enough? So that would be interesting. I will attend that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's ISSN is also one of the rare organizations where I feel like I can submit different talks every couple of years and it's accepted. Obviously, you have to have the background, you have to have the knowledge in it and that type of thing. A couple of years ago, I did a talk on psychedelics. A few years before, I did one on metabolic flexibility. Now I'm doing one on wearables. So it's fun where I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of older organizations there's no way they would let you do that. You get pigeonholed into only one thing, and that's all you ever get to talk about.
Yeah, where I'm always throwing ideas out to Joey, and I'm just like, hey, and I even mentioned the debate session. I was like,
Yes, I think we should
David,
do that.
David Church and I were totally joking, but serious at the
No, I'm
like
serious.
we need to get debate stands up there and we need to get a hot topic and just each person gets 30 seconds to a minute to talk and just back and forth. I'm like, that would be so entertaining.
Yeah, or even like they do the data blitz, you could have
Yes.
a data debate, right? Where each person
Yep.
gets maybe 60 seconds to 2 minutes to decide their side. The other person gets that time. You each only get one 30-second rebuttal, and then the audience has to vote who won or something.
Yes. Okay, Joey, we need to do this.
Yeah,
I
because
think
those
it'd
are
be
what's
great.
fun too, right? Even if the person
Oh,
doesn't agree with the topic they're presenting, all these people are well versed enough in the science to pull out the literature, and then you can show that just because someone may have a convincing argument, then the other person has the opposite argument. You're like, ooh, that sounds good too.
yeah,
So you realize it's more complicated than what the simplistic
exactly.
30 seconds takeaway on TikTok or whatever the kids are doing nowadays.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, so tell us a little about, I know you work for a supplement company, and I initially found you through a lot of the research on CDP choline, which I've been following that research for quite some time and feel like for up until the past few years, it was one of those, I called it like when I did formulations for companies, like a under the radar ingredient, because a lot of times companies, is not so much now, but especially 5 years ago, were like, there's that much research on it. This stuff actually works. I'm like, yeah,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
like a ton of research on it, and it wasn't really widely used until now, but it's cool to see a lot more stuff coming out about it.
Yeah, I honestly, so Kyowa Hakko USA is where I'm at, and it's a Japanese company that does fermentation and nutrients, and it actually comes from the parent company Kirin Holdings. So Ichiban beer. I don't know if
Oh,
you've
I
heard.
didn't know that was the same company.
Yeah, so I was
Ah,
like, and they do their beer through fermentation, like obviously.
yep.
So they use the same patented
Oh,
technology for these nutrients. So citicoline, which is the branded form of Cognizin, and then glutathione is called Cetria. And so it's through this fermentation process, which lends to be a little bit more high purality and quality ingredient that will, in theory, be more bioavailable and extend to more outcome-based measures from a clinical stance. So I was at I guess a competing company before. I won't mention the name, but I started reading about Cognizin, or you can call it citicoline, you can call it CDP choline. It's got plenty of
all
names.
the same thing, right?
It's all the same compound.
Yeah.
I started reading about their science and just being so intrigued to one, an endogenous substance that I have within my body that I was unknowing about, but also the fact that it is a pharmaceutical drug over in Japan used to treat stroke in hospitals. But here in the US, it's a dietary supplement that has been thoroughly researched for over 30 years in a variety of age groups and in different body regions. So, like even 4-year-olds for eye health. And then you've got 80-year-olds looking at long-term cognitive memory using mini mental state exams, so trying to combat that cognitive decline due to aging. And then we have us, Kyowa Hakko USA, that's like, how do we use this in the health science spaces and use it for things that people are looking for, like the now? Focus, attention, reaction time, processing speed. So there's some really interesting studies that we've conducted. And my job coming on board was to expand the research because normally they've done it through the Japanese Research Center. But I was like, we're a US company, we should be doing it through the US. And so we are starting to team up with some really awesome partners. And I think you will know all of these names. Tim Zeigenfuss at CAHS.
Mm-hmm.
He just ran a proof of concept study for us to look at acute measures. So what's happening when you take citicoline within 1 to 4 hours. That is we just got the data. We had a week. What is today? Thursday. We had a meeting Monday, Monday
Oh,
morning, 8
nice.
a.m. We went through the data and I'm so excited. There's EEG measures. There's some really, we did like PALMS, profile mood
Oh, very
questionnaire.
cool.
So it will not be published. It's going to be internal data only, but we're discussing how we can put it out there. This is something maybe I may ask that I can present at ISSN because
Yeah.
it's some really cool stuff. So Tim is working on that. He's also working on a mood study for us. I'm working with Chad Kursick for glutathione, maybe doing another POC, proof of concept study looking at gut health with glutathione. And then the biggest one that I'm the most excited about because it's sports is Rick Kreider at Texas A&M. We're going to be doing a sports performance light test with Cognizin. And so we've got lots going on and I already have to start planning for 2026 and I don't even know where to go, but that is the cool thing about Kyowa is we keep investing in the science and we keep expanding and researching new areas and it's such an untouchable ingredient. Like this cooler is all Cognizin filled beverages.
Oh, nice.
And then I've got like a ton of protein bars from Mosh that have Cognizin in it. So it's like it's so versatile in what you can do. And then it's even just as versatile in what it does in the human body. So very cool nutrient.
And the Dr. Kreider study you said was light. Is that looking at like a reaction time to different lights? There's all different systems
Yeah.
that do that, from the high-end functional neurology ones to like the consumer blaze pod type thing. And
Yeah,
is it
so
something like that?
originally we were thinking about the Dino Vision, but then I
Mm-hmm.
started thinking about so one of my roles is claim substantiation, and it's not easy to take science from a clinical setting and putting it in a real world setting because they
Yeah.
don't always translate, right? You know this. So our customers are like, how what you're doing in the clinic, how is that going to translate into real world application for sports? And so I was thinking about this and was like, the Dino Vision is just hand-eye coordination, but a lot of sports require your feet and
Mm-hmm.
both upper and lower extremities simultaneously. So Rick and I were discussing how do we do this? There were some ideas tossed around about sitting down and having the lights that are movable. I think it's called the Fit Light system. So you could do
Mm-hmm.
hands, feet touching all the time. But then I was like, oh, that limits if you're sitting. So what about if we stand and put it in a circle and then they have to like have change of direction, which is great for multiple sports, right? You
Yep.
have to be able to react and turn and using feet and hands at different times. I'm like, should they hold a plank and then touch them? So this is like the cool part of my job is like, how do I organize this in a way that when I do translate it to a big customer, say GNC, and they say, well, how can we tell our customers how it was tested and how they can look for improvements in the gym? I can accurately, confidently say, well, we did test it in these different settings and saw positive results. Hopefully, see positive results. I can't predict science, but it's a very cool study with Rick, and I think he's a great partner to do it with.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned just different canned beverages, because I think one of the cool things, you can speak to this, is that it's actually stable in liquid and the shelf life is pretty good, because the classic one here is creatine, which everyone's familiar with. That creatine long term in liquid is just not stable. I know Glanbia and there's some other companies that claim to have maybe some better forms and maybe ways around that possibly. But historically, people have tried to put it in beverages and tried all sorts of different things. And when you run the analysis, it just doesn't stay long. This is not
Yeah.
to, if people put some in their drink and they go to the gym, you're fine. But we're talking like days, weeks, months,
Yep.
years. It just slowly degrades, where acetylcholine appears to be quite stable, correct?
It is. And we do a lot of thorough quality testing. So once it's been in a new application, whether it's a gummy, lollipop, bar, we continue to do efficacy testing to make sure that the composition that we originally put in it is still there at the end product. So sometimes you got to do some overage, which typically is normal anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But it's for us, it's all about being transparent in the science. And if I tested it at 250 milligrams in the clinical setting and saw these results, well, then I want that to be accurately reflected in the product. And so I also want to make sure that not only was that intended dose put in the beginning, but it should be there when it's consumed as well. So we do that. And I've got several in products, but they're also in coffee. There's non-alc beverages. There's fermented, not fermented, but fortified waters, which is interesting. I don't know if you've seen those.
I haven't seen those yet.
The caramel water, they keep actually it's in the cooler, but they keep all of the ingredients up in the cap. So it's a
Ah,
delivery system.
yep,
Then when you're ready, you push it and then you shake it, which you don't have to do that with citicoline because like we were just talking about, it's
yep.
extremely stable, but I guess they have some some B vitamins in there that they're worried about not holding in a liquid solution for long periods. But so that's a pretty cool delivery system. But yeah, acetylcholine, no flavor, really no smell. We have,
No, it's surprisingly, because if you've ever,
yeah.
one of the things I do with raws, which again, I would not recommend people do this, but I just literally dump the capsule in my mouth to see what it
Oh
tastes
yeah.
like because whoever is formulating it, the next person down the line, the flavor master, whoever, like they want to know, hey, this is pretty astringent or this is neutral or this has, because that makes a big difference depending upon what you're trying to do. Because it's like long gone are the days of only marketing to the hardcore crowd who don't care what anything tastes like. Like those days have not existed for quite a while. If
Gotta
it
taste
doesn't
good.
taste good now, almost no one's going to use the product. There are a few niches and rare exceptions to that, but in terms of mass appeal, like it has to taste pretty good and has to show up and meet label claims and everything else.
Yeah, I never gave flavor houses the respect that they deserve.
Dude, it's hard.
I got to sit in on a sensory testing for one of the companies, and we were how meticulous
Oh yeah.
it is to have a single flavor and have just a row of variations, and then to taste the different notes and to walk through this process with the company, the contract manufacturer, the flavor house, and then the customer, the end product manufacturer, and then the ingredient company there. So it was such a unique situation that I'm very grateful that I was able to participate in, because now I see how complicated it is. And I'm much more appreciative when I do get a beverage or food that just it hits the note of what the flavor is supposed to be. So, and at the end of the day, you can have the best ingredients in a product, but if it tastes like crap, nobody's gonna consume it. So, yeah, flavor houses, respect. You have a hard job.
Yeah. And that is also the hard thing if you're starting kind of your own supplement or you're a smaller brand. Like I looked at years ago, I wanted to put CDP and some other things in as a coffee nootropic. And so I went and had everything all specced out, had everything done. And the bugger was the ingredients I wanted, the raws were still pretty high because CDP, especially 7 years ago, was definitely more expensive than it is now. And the minimum runs to do anything were crazy high. And the issue was with the flavor houses, they could do one flavor per run. So
Mm,
I'm like, oh my God, what if the customers don't like this flavor or it tastes a little bit weird? Like I am out a large amount of
a
cash
lot
and
of money.
sitting with this product I can't sell. So I
Yeah.
ended up like canning the whole thing, and I think it's gotten easier now. And I get it, like if you're doing that type of work, a lot of it's proprietary, a lot of it is your own data that you have, and there has to be a return on that investment. So a lot of times doing smaller runs, doing things like that, not really efficacious. And on the flip side, like seeing bigger companies go through months and months of hundreds of iterations of this slight tweak to that and tasting like the three different kinds of Reb B and Reb A and the sweeteners alone and how they affected. And then if you want to use like acetyl L-carnitine or something that's really astringent, okay, how do we mask that? How do we get that to stay? It gets to be complicated really fast.
It is a complicating process. I'm glad that's not part of my job. Like
Yeah.
I do it every once in a while, but and then when I get people asking like, "Hey, we're having a manufacturing problem or a formulation issue, something doesn't seem to be working," and I'm like, "Well, it's not our ingredient because I can promise you it plays very friendly
Yeah.
and if
Super
not
easy to
all,
use,
it's so easy to use and it's so
which is the
nice.
exception, not the rule.
Yeah, exactly. And we just had a situation with that. And I wrote back, I was like, I promise you, it's not our ingredient. Please check the other ingredients and do your testing there because I'm pretty sure it's not ours, but we're still willing to help, of course. But yeah, the whole process is very interesting. And instead of choline itself is just such a fascinating compound. I recommend it to almost anybody, truly. Even, well, I can't say that on the air. Put my regulatory hat on real quick. I was like, don't say that. But like my kids who are older, they love the drinks, the protein bars, and the lollipops from Ollie. So it's a choline donor, but it does so much more than
Yeah,
that.
explain to what exactly is it if people are not familiar, and what are some of the mechanisms of how it works?
Yeah, it is endogenous. We do make it, but we don't. And I say this to a lot of people, and I think this is pretty common when we say the poison is in the dose. Well, the benefit is in the dose as well. So I hear people saying, "Oh, well, can you hit a ceiling effect?" I'm like, "Sure, you can hit a ceiling effect with almost everything, right? Like
Oh, sure.
even water, right?
Yeah.
Which is essential for our bodies. But so we are finding with acetylcholine is that it is the rate limiting step in the Kennedy pathway. So if you start with choline, it goes all the way down, and then the rate limiting step is acetylcholine, and then it will go to phosphatidylcholine, which is a phospholipid. And that makes up 30% of the phospholipids in your phospholipid bilayer and your neuronal cells. And so in your brain, you have different cells that communicate with one another through synaptic communication. So that's going to trigger neurotransmitters like acetylcholine, norepinephrine, dopamine. And then we're discovering some indirect effects with serotonin, so possibly
Hmm.
some mood effects. But it does more than that. So that's going to translate to better focus and attention and communication, and so working memory, things like that, short-term memory. But then the phospholipids itself helps to lend to the integrity of the cell, which is going to help maintain cellular health. So as you age, your cell wall tends to degrade. And so we want to see like a nice turnover of replenishing the phospholipids. And so when you supplement with acetylcholine, we're actually seeing that turnover rate increased, as well as the mitochondria functions being activated. And so this was really cool in an MRS study where it was a functional MRI where we got to see one, where it's activating in the brain, which was the ACC region in the frontal lobe, but also what it's doing with different metabolites. And so one of them was that it was increasing beta ATP, so ATP or energy source directly in the brain. So we're getting a mental energy boost without it being a stimulant. So that's what I really love from like a sports exercise stance is being able to to not control, but like to increase mental energy to maybe help with stand any mental fatigue that you're having. I also I have an idea in my head and I would love to test this one day. And you can piggyback and we could talk about it, but when I look at athletes, or even myself, I used to be an athlete, now I'm older, but you get to a point of muscle failure where your muscles are like, I am done. I have nothing left. But then there's a sneaky little voice in your head that's, you've got one more. You can do it. So there's this like mental resilience, mental toughness aspect that actually helps you push past that point of failure in your muscles. So I'm like, which one is stronger? Which can you have such awesome mental toughness that you can see huge performance benefits, even to the point where there is failure? So that is a test I would love to run that study with Cognizin and see what kind of effects we can get because I just don't know. But that's where my mind goes with it when I see the data that we have. There's also genetic mapping that we've been doing. So we've been looking at differentiated genes that are being expressed. And we are seeing that there's not only in the brain, but there's various components throughout the body that are being tapped into.
Hmm.
We have so much data. That was actually brought up in our meeting this morning. I was like, what are we doing with all this data? I am not a geneticist. So we are like, oh my God, there's over 700 genes that are being upregulated and downregulated. And then you have to learn the
Hmm.
pathways and then to what effect is it a good thing and what effect is it a bad thing? And so there's so much to unpack, but also really interesting stuff here with this ingredient. So we're just scratching the surface of what we know, and which is crazy over 30 years of research. There's hundreds of publications, but there's just so much more to discover with this ingredient.
Yeah, in your study, could you do something like a reps to failure somehow, probably be machine-based, controlled, like you could do a randomized double-blind placebo control crossover, or one group gets a higher dose of CDP choline. It could be acute, or you could do loading. We'll talk about the dosing coming
Yeah.
up, and then see how many more reps you could get to like failure, meaning failure, you can't move the weight anymore. So it's more of a hard endpoint and see is there a difference? Because if there is, I think that's something like some of the early creatine research has done,
Hmm.
like trying to replicate some of those designs, because I think that also is very practical to people who lift. Then you could say, hey, based on this study, when you consume this dose, this timing, whatever, you got 2 more reps, 3 more reps, whatever it is. I think that also translates to being able to tell a cool story to people who are going to the gym because then they understand what that actually means too.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also, obviously, you need objective data, but I love
Correct.
having subjective data too. So having
Sure.
some sort of questionnaire being like, do you actually felt, did you feel that you could do more, or did you feel like you were defeated? And so I would definitely have that as a complementary endpoint. But I agree that's a good place to start is to look at what obviously what's already been done and replicate that. As per the dose, we are finding like 250 milligrams a day is not necessarily the minimum, but like from a recommendation stance from the data that I am seeing being produced in the clinical setting, I would say 250. But when you start to go up to 500, even 1,000 milligrams, we're seeing differentiation in what is being tapped into in the body. So where mental energy comes in is that 500 to 1,000 milligram, we're seeing much more activity. And so I always recommend around 500 per day. I tend to take 1,000 between the drinks and the protein, and I have gummies. I take it every day. So I am learning that the higher the dose and even the duration. So that's why we were doing the acute study too, because I want to know what's happening with a single dose, like in a beverage. But then if you take it 28 days, 3 months, 4 months, whatever, what changes? And so we are learning there is differentiation. And so we're going to keep studying, but I'm not sure for the mental fatigue one. Should that, I'm not sure about the design yet, but I'm still playing with that idea.
Yeah, that was one of my questions because I think my interpretation, reading some of the literature and from talking to other people in the field, that I think historically it's probably been underdosed. And maybe this was due to cost, maybe it's due to some of the earlier research. And I found at least 500 is the sweet spot. I haven't gone up too much beyond that in a while. So that was super interesting what you're saying about dosing.
500 is definitely a sweet spot. And I think, unfortunately, when you are an ingredient manufacturer and you're in the supplement space, you have to design these studies that are going to be consumer friendly. And
Yep.
there is a price associated to the dose, right? So a lot of customers want the absolute lowest dose they can possibly have, one for price purposes, but also for formulation fun to add other additional ingredients. The space isn't unlimited. So we want to test what they want, but we're learning that you got to go up. So it's a hard balancing act of doing what your customers and your partners want to see versus what the science is telling you. And so we are finding ways around that, but 500, you nailed it. That seems to be the dose that is best per day, at least.
Yeah, would that as the be an acute dose? So if I'm gonna go to the gym and train, it's a heavier day. Would I take 500 milligrams before, or do I need to split that dosing up, or does it matter?
Yeah, that's another great question. The study that we did do was a single dose at 500 milligrams, but I do get people that ask me, can I split the dose? And honestly, I have no reason to say no, but also I don't know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because that's not how we did it in the lab. But I think there was one study where they did split the dose to 250, and it was a reaction time study. So very possible to see similar effects. I just tend to try to replicate exactly what I did do in the lab, which is 500 single dose, but I don't see any reason to say no.
And then time course, 60-ish minutes before, if someone's using a pre-workout type thing. We know caffeine on an empty stomach is peak blood levels 30 to 60 minutes. Is it similar to that?
No, actually, we have some pharmacokinetic data that shows, and this is what helped drive that POC design, was it starts to rise 60 minutes, but the peak, like the most elevation that we saw was around hour 4.
Oh,
So
4. That's way longer than I thought.
yeah, in fact, I believe it has a 56-hour half-life where it
Hmm.
actually peaks at hour 21, dips down, and then peaks again. It has the most bizarre profile.
Okay, so I don't feel so
Um,
bad that I couldn't make heads or tails out of that then.
No, no, I'm still learning too. So, yeah, it's definitely behaving very differently than what we expected. So, that is again why we did that acute study because I was like, people are asking me like, when do I take this if I'm using it as a pre-workout? And I'm like, we are seeing benefits at an hour, 60 minutes, but I'm seeing the greatest benefits between 3 and 4 hours. So
Hmm.
maybe it's the first morning you wake up. So I know I wake up, I take my multi immediately, and then sometimes I take my Cognizin, and which does help me throughout the day. I notice I'm more productive, but then I still get that 3 p.m. slump. I feel like everybody does. And then that's when I try to not do caffeine. Sometimes I'll grab my Cognizin gummies. And I really do see an effect. Maybe not immediately, but like at the end of the day, I go back to my checklist and I'm like, damn, I was productive today. I got stuff done. So I don't think that there's responders and non-responders like caffeine where you have that genetic component
Hmm.
where you have like fast metabolizers and slow metabolizers. I haven't encountered that, but again, maybe it's very possible that there are non-responders to a specific dose. So that is something we may consider looking at, I think, in the future.
And what are the downsides if you go too high, let's just say on an acute dose? So if someone says, hey, I want to try 500 or above, are there certain things they should watch out for? Of, oops, yep, going a little bit too high.
Um, so personally, I've done 2,000 milligrams a day in a couple hours, not on a single dose, not experienced any side effects. When we look at the research, no adverse side effects have been reported, even at a high dose at
Hmm.
1,000 to 2,000 milligrams being taken in a single dose. I do know it is much higher as a pharmaceutical drug over in Asia, and it's given in an IV, so it's an even more potent dosing regimen that, and again, no negative side effects being reported. However, I will say we do have a friend in the industry that's a formulator and a chemist, and he likes to test the limits. And I believe I don't know how much he took in a setting, but I remember him telling me that he experienced a very unique choline situation where if you do take too much and it stimulates a lot of neurotransmitter activation in a setting. So whether it's acetylcholine paired with alpha GPC paired with phosphatidylserine, and then if you add maybe like a ketone, like HMB ketones or something, it has this crazy effect in your brain where you have almost like a euphoric experience.
Hmm.
So I have not personally done that, but I have heard of someone playing around with that and they said it was a crazy experience, but I don't think it was bad. So I think we're good. The safety profile is pretty amazing with citicoline.
Yeah, which is rare too. Obviously, you can look at the therapeutic index or therapeutic window, whatever terms you're using, and it's rare to find ingredients that work really well, but have that pretty high, large index, meaning that the amount that's efficacious versus the historically it's the LD50,
Yeah.
50% to kill a rat population or whatever. But it's rare to find ingredients that have that super high window because even things like aspirin and Tylenol, like you can take 20 times too much and have acute liver issues like real
Oh
fast.
yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that every drug and everything has a different kind of
It's limit.
spectrum of where it's at.
Yeah, and that was one of the appeals that brought me over to Kyowa,
Yeah.
going, what is this magical ingredient that seems limitless, right? Like we have to tap in at some point and find its limitations. And that's also my role personally is like, where does the benefits stop happening? And I haven't found it yet. I'm sure I will. I've only been at Kiowa for 2 years, but I'm sure at some point we'll find what it can't do. But at least from a safety stance, I feel extremely confident.
Yeah. Because I think, like you mentioned too, I don't know if it was Renshaw or who the researchers were, but a lot of the earlier work and even some pathologies, like they were using gram dosages. They were, it
Yep.
was pretty high dosages for quite some period of time. And I don't remember there being, at least in the studies, reported any real downsides.
Yeah, exactly. Other ingredients, like you said, you may see some detrimental effects
For
on your
sure.
kidneys, but when we look at toxicology studies, everything seems to be good.
Yeah. How does this, you mentioned alpha GPC. How does this compare to it? Because I feel like, at least in the sports nutrition field, and I've gotten some pushback on this too, and I like alpha GPC. I think there is some beneficial data on it. But when I've done consulting, I usually try to point out here's all the data on citicoline, here's the data on alpha GPC. And to my opinion, there's really no comparison in terms of the amount of data that's been generated.
I've that was one of the first things I did was doing a side by side comparison sheet and just coming at it from a scientific angle, right?
Right.
No bias, no agenda. And that's one of my favorite things about this role too is yes, we have a sales team, but like I always emphasize that I am science and I'm transparent and I'm not here to sell, even though I am here to help assist sales. I will always be truthful in what the science is saying. And so I did look into that. And one of the things I was finding routinely is Alpha GPC has great science. They have a lot of
Hmm.
good areas that they're tapping into that maybe acetylcholine can't. But one thing I'm finding routinely in the market space is people aren't using the efficacious dose that's being used. Also, a lot
Correct.
of the studies are done in IV, not in oral dosing.
Yep.
So they're translating the science inaccurately. There's also a percent weightage that's being done that's not being calculated for. So an alpha GPC could be 80% in the study, but they're using 30% in the product. And then it was a 600 milligram dose in the study, but they're using 200 to 300 milligrams.
Yeah,
And
because they just look at the ingredient amount, and you don't. The bugger is you don't know the percentage of that, and a lot of times it's not
exactly.
disclosed
It's
either.
not. And some of the customers that I've worked with, like Ghosts, are starting to actually put that on their
They're
label.
getting better.
They're
Yes.
getting better. They're being more transparent. But the problem is they're relying on a dose that's not reflective of the studies, but yet they're using the claims.
Yep.
So I have an issue with that from an ethical stance because you're misleading the consumer. And that is something we pride ourselves on at Kyowa is that I make sure that it is completely reflective of what we've tested in the lab. So that's where my discrepancy and issues come in with alpha GPC is how it's being used, not how it's been tested. Because the
Right.
testing is good, the research is good. The other red flag that I have been seeing, and I think this is still up for debate, is the TMAO metabolites that are being manufactured through supplementation with alpha GPC in the liver. And so I did read those case studies. I'd say the verdict is out. And I know I hear a lot of back and forth, but I do know that's causing some regulatory issues going to like the EU. And so a lot of companies are coming to us saying, hey, we currently have alpha GPC in our product, but we can't get into Canada
Yeah.
or wherever in Europe. So, but you can with acetylcholine in some of the regions, not all. So I would say yes. I actually think there's some positive, more acute benefits for alpha GPC than there is acetylcholine, but that's also because we haven't tested it. And so
Yeah,
that's
I would argue that study hasn't really, at least my view, hasn't been done with CDP. There's no direct head-to-head comparison that I've seen.
right. So that is my job is to look at the study side by side and see like where are we lacking according to what alpha GPC has studied versus what we've studied and how can we measure up to see which one is a true standout and which one are they complementary? Do you need one or the other? Or can they just play nice in the sandbox together? I don't know. Like I think they can, but I do see definite varying benefits between the two.
Yeah, very cool. And yeah, I know you got a couple other ingredients we'll touch on briefly here towards the end. You mentioned one about a glutathione product also.
Glutathione, that is, for me, in the past year, that's become the new ingredient. I've always been in the neurocognitive space with supplements, even at my previous job, and how it translates to sports. So coming to an antioxidant, I was just like overwhelmed by the amount of mechanism of action that it has. So glutathione is considered the master antioxidant. It's a tripeptide, so it consists of glycine, cysteine, and glutamate. But there's two existing forms within your body. Again, it's another endogenous substance that we naturally make. You have a reduced form, typically labeled as GSH. If you're ever reading articles in GSH and you're like, what is that? It's the reduced form of glutathione. And then you have the oxidized form, which is GSSG. I don't know where that acronym came from. But what I have learned is that the ratio is a sensitive marker for cellular oxidative balance. And so what I've learned is we have accumulation of free radicals that happen in our body every day, literally from breathing, eating, sun exposure, smoking, alcohol, aging. These are natural glutathione levels. They drop as we age in both males and females. And I think it starts around age 30 to 40. It starts to slightly decrease. And then, of course, I asked myself, like, what does glutathione do? Why, other than being an antioxidant, like how does this work in the body? And so glutathione being an antioxidant will donate extra electrons to those free radicals to help neutralize them and help with that cellular balance. So you're actually fighting oxidative stress. So as you're increasing free radicals, you should also be increasing your antioxidants like glutathione, vitamin C, vitamin E, since There's a whole recycling system between those antioxidants that I learned. There's a whole pathway, which is pretty fascinating too. So it lends to immunity. It lends to respiratory health. There's also skin benefits. What else? The most interesting is sports.
Mhm.
I didn't even realize that it had an area of mechanism where it works with nitric oxide metabolism. And so I was like, what? Like, how does,
I think it helps prolong it. Wasn't that one of the theories?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I was reading, because originally I was like nitric oxide, that's vasodilation. You're getting that from L-citrulline and arginine, and like, how does glutathione have any effect on the nitric oxide production system whatsoever to lend to better blood flow and vasodilation? And so what I found again is the nitric oxide molecule, it's going to drive that vasodilation and what we call muscle pump. But in reality, it's like super unstable and it gets oxidized almost as fast as it's made. Whereas glutathione, it preserves nitric oxide's lifespan by converting it. And then essentially it's that slow release of NO. And then what we do is, so you have that mechanism, but then when you actually pair it with a vasodilator like citrulline, which will increase that NO synthase, when you add glutathione, it protects and stabilizes it. So now you're
Hmm.
creating a sustained vascular response. And then hypothetically, you should get better oxygen delivery and better nutrients and to the muscles, to the working muscles. And then over time, you should see better performance and faster recovery too. So I thought that was very fascinating. And we actually have 4 studies with that combination of glutathione and L-citrulline, where they're looking at the first study looked at nitric oxide production, looking at nitrates that are being produced. The second study was looking at body composition using a DEXA scan with an 8-week resistance training program, like what is happening with your muscle mass and your strength gains. The third study was flow mediated dilation. So they wanted to actually measure the blood flow through the vessels using your brachial artery Doppler. And then the fourth study was postmenopause women, but there was
Hmm.
no exercise intervention. And they just wanted to look at FMD again, but also cardiovascular benefits. So, like, how is it helping blood pressure? How is it helping mean arterial pressure? And there's actually cardiovascular benefits too, which I mean, makes sense when you think of vasodilation, but when you put all 4 together, it's telling a really cool story for sports.
Yeah, that's cool. And there's some old research, like I did part of my PhD on FMD, some FMD data looking at endothelial function related to cardiovascular health. Because
Yeah.
you can't really, it's hard to access the cardiac vessels, and there's obviously issues doing stuff on them. But if it's a system-wide systemic thing, you can get access to the brachial. And if you can see how that's responding, that is not a direct, but it gives us some data about the status of your vessel health.
It's not the best. It is what it is, right? It's like measuring
Yeah.
nitric oxide. It's such a finicky molecule that just disintegrates. It's so hard to measure, and you can do salivary strips. They're not the best.
Yeah.
I'm still asking researchers around who are inventing different validated tools on how to measure nitric oxide. There was one lady that was creating some sort of headband. I don't know where that went. I don't know how validated it was, but it's one of those areas where you have to use what you have. It could be better when it's the gold standard because there's nothing else available. That's what you got to use.
Yeah, and I think shout out to Evan Pycon and the guys at Knox. I think Adam Ghazali was one of the guys who just worked on this study, published a study looking at that as a non-invasive measure, I believe, of nitric oxide possibly too. So that might be a marker or consumer device people might want to check into if they're going down that route.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I love science. I love research, how people like band together and come up with new ways to measure things because they see there's a need. And being able to use it in a research study is fun too.
Yeah. And I heard one of the criticisms of glutathione is that you can't consume it orally because it seems like in the past there's been all these different routes of trying to get it in. And what's the story on that?
Yeah. So we've been trying to combat that voice. We do have a study, we call it the Ritchie study. It's like our landmark Hall of Fame study where we actually do see that oral absorption of glutathione is readily available in the bloodstream and is
Hmm.
being stored throughout the body. So it's stored in whole blood as well as red blood cells and then even buccal cells. So it was a 3-arm study, and then the smallest dose was 250 milligrams and the largest dose was 1,000 milligrams. And of course, the higher the dose, the more stores we're seeing, right? But it lends to the credibility that just because you have a compound in an oral application doesn't mean that they're all the same, right? So, and again, this is hypothetical. This is just my own opinion. We haven't tested it. I would love to. But when you take a synthetic compound versus a compound that's been manufactured through a fermentation process that have less actives attached to it, I do believe it will lend to better bioavailability, although I can't support that because I don't have a side-by-side comparison. But I do think when we look at the synthetic form of glutathione being measured previously in studies and seeing that it was poorly available, and then you have our study where it's the same compound, but also a little bit different, more pure, and then seeing that it is readily available, it's like, well, maybe they aren't the same, right? So I do love being able to use that study. I do get people that say, well, what about Joe Rogan and Gwyneth Paltrow that are saying that it has to be in an IV? I'm not saying that it can't. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that you can't use both. I'm saying the IV, from what we've seen, the half-life is within minutes. So
Mm,
it is readily absorbed and utilized. And maybe that's a great thing. Maybe that means that you really truly needed it and your body just sucked it up and poof, it's gone. So acutely, yeah, if you can afford it, if you like needles,
I
if you
hate needles.
I'm a no needle kind of person.
Oh,
I'm terrified to ever get Botox because I don't want a needle coming at my face.
oof. Oh,
Um,
ugh.
so I just use topical creams. But so the idea is if you are okay with that, you're okay with the price tag, you want those acute immediate benefits, and you use a compounding pharmacy that is regulated and a highly skilled trained person because there is a high risk of infection, go for it. Reap those benefits. But if you want those long-term stores that you're going to see benefits for a while, that's affordable and you can take in a capsule, this is probably the best option for you. So you can do both.
Yeah, awesome. And what was the name of that? Was it Cetria? Is that the name correct?
Yeah, Cetria is Cetria glutathione. So yeah, it's the different form of glutathione in that it's just branded and fermented.
Awesome. That was a good overview. Thank you so much.
Fun. And now we just got to get Joey to do a debate at ISSN and maybe we can be a part of it and bring up some fun topics to fight over.
Yeah, I think that's good. Well, I'll definitely we'll have to email him for sure. We'll stick DC on there and a bunch of other people.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. A huge thanks to Katie for coming on the podcast and talking about all things related to acetylcholine or CDP choline. Really, really appreciate it. In addition to many other things to help your performance and cognition. Make sure to check out all the great stuff she's got going on. We'll put all of her links and everything below. And if you wanted to hear the Flex 4, so top 4 things you should know about acetylcholine, you can get that for free by hopping on to my daily insider newsletter. Go to MikeTNelson.com and go newsletter, or we'll put a direct link down below. And when you hop onto that, you will get that Flex 4. And you'll also get all the other Flex 4s that have never been published anywhere else. So if you're looking for bite-sized tips and tricks and action items, check that out. It's completely free. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast. As always, really, really appreciate it. Got tons of great episodes coming up here again every week. I think you will enjoy them. And if you have someone who would enjoy this podcast, make sure to check them. They can check it out by sending it to them or recommending it. Whatever you can do to help us with the old algorithms. Give us the thumbs up, the likes. I heard you can submit reviews on Spotify now and other places, Apple. Everything you do helps us go a long ways to getting better distribution of the podcast, which so far has been all organic, and thanks to you. So thank you so much for listening. Greatly appreciate it. And stay tuned for another episode next week. See ya.
Did you see that?
Yes, the frog is certainly taking a beating on this show.
Yeah, it's hard to feel sorry for him. We take a beating every show.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information on the podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease or prescribing any medication or other treatment, Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider before taking any medication or nutritional supplement, and with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this or any other podcast. Reliance on the podcast is solely at your own risk. Information provided on the podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and any of the health professionals affiliated with our podcast. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to therein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.